No one would give the eulogy at my cruel grandmother's funeral, so I volunteered and told a beautiful, fake story about her. After the service, her lawyer approached me with a smile. "Congratulations," he said. "You just passed her final test." Before the story, let's do this. Comment your age, and be sure to subscribe for more amazing stories every day. Now let's head back to that awkward funeral parlor. I was sitting in the front row of Riverside Funeral Home, watching my family squirm in their seats like children who'd been called to the principal's office. We were all there for the same reason, to bury my grandmother, Evelyn Walsh. But none of us wanted to be there, and we certainly didn't want to pretend we were sad about it. Evelyn Walsh had died at 84, and if I'm being completely honest, most of the family was relieved. She had been, by any measure, a difficult woman. Not just difficult, cruel. For as long as I could remember, she had wielded her wealth and sharp tongue like weapons, cutting down anyone who dared to disappoint her, which was pretty much everyone. I'm 28 years old, a high school English teacher, and I had always been what you might call the forgotten grandson. While my cousins competed for Grandma Evelyn's attention and approval, and more importantly, her money, I had kept my distance. Not because I was above the family drama, but because I had learned early on that getting close to Evelyn Walsh meant getting hurt. She had a gift for finding your weakest spot and pressing on it until you broke. My cousin Derek, who had struggled with his weight as a teenager, still flinched when anyone mentioned food because of the comments she used to make. My cousin Sarah had given up her dream of becoming an artist after Evelyn spent an entire Christmas dinner explaining why creative types always ended up poor and miserable. But here's the thing about Evelyn. She wasn't just randomly cruel. She was strategically cruel. She would dangle the promise of inheritance like a carrot, making it clear that her considerable fortune would go to whoever pleased her most. This had turned family gatherings into gladiatorial contests, with siblings and cousins competing to see who could earn her favor. I had opted out of that game years ago. While everyone else was performing for her approval, I had simply visited. Not often, maybe once every few months, but I would stop by her massive house on Elm Street, sit in her formal living room, and listen to her complain about the family, the neighbors, the state of the world. I wasn't afraid to go against her ideas. I listened and talked. She had said to me once, "You're the only one who doesn't want anything from me." And I wasn't sure if it was a compliment or an accusation. Now she was gone, and we were all gathered in this sterile funeral home, staring at a casket surrounded by flowers that no one had sent out of love. The funeral director, a nervous man named Mr. Peterson, had been trying for 20 minutes to find someone willing to give the eulogy. "Surely someone would like to share some memories of Mrs. Walsh," he asked, his voice getting more desperate with each repetition. The silence was deafening. My Uncle Robert, Evelyn's eldest son, was steadying his shoes with intense concentration. My Aunt Margaret was checking her phone. My cousins were all suddenly fascinated by the floral arrangements. "Anyone?" Mr. Peterson tried again. "A favorite memory? A lesson she taught you?"
More silence. I could see people in the small congregation, mostly elderly neighbors and a few people from her church, beginning to whisper among themselves. This was becoming embarrassing. She was a very strong woman, my Uncle Robert finally offered weakly. Strong-willed, my Aunt Margaret corrected, and even that felt like she was being generous. Mr. Peterson looked around the room with growing panic. In 30 years of conducting funerals, he had probably never encountered a situation where literally no one wanted to say anything nice about the deceased. That's when I stood up. "I'll do it," I said. Every head in the room turned to look at me. My Uncle Robert's eyebrows shot up in surprise. My cousin Derek actually looked concerned, as if I might be having some kind of breakdown. "Nathan," my Aunt Margaret whispered, "you don't have to." "It's fine," I said, walking toward the podium. "Someone should say something." As I stood behind the lectern, looking out at the small crowd of people who had come to see Evelyn Walsh buried, I realized I had absolutely no idea what I was going to say. I couldn't tell the truth, that she'd been a bitter, manipulative woman who had made most of our lives miserable, but I also couldn't just stand there in silence. So, I did something I had never done before in my life. I lied. Completely, thoroughly, and with absolute conviction. My grandmother, Evelyn Walsh, was a woman who taught me that love comes in many forms. I saw my cousin Sarah's eyes widen in surprise. Love? From Grandma Evelyn? When I was young, she would invite me into her kitchen on Sunday afternoons. She would teach me to make her famous apple pie, the one with the secret ingredient she never wrote down in any recipe book. This was completely false. Evelyn had never cooked anything in my presence, and I was pretty sure she considered the kitchen to be the housekeeper's domain. She would tell me stories about her childhood during the Depression, about how her family always found ways to help their neighbors who had even less. Also false. Evelyn had grown up wealthy and had never shown any particular interest in helping anyone. She taught me that true strength isn't about being the loudest voice in the room, I said, looking directly at my Uncle Robert, who had spent years trying to shout over his mother's criticisms. It's about being the person others can count on when everything falls apart. I was making this up as I went along, but something strange was happening. As I spoke, I could see people in the congregation beginning to nod. Some of the elderly neighbors were wiping their eyes. Even my own family members were looking moved by this fictional version of Evelyn Walsh. She had a way of seeing potential in people that they couldn't see in themselves. She would push you, yes, but only because she believed you were capable of more than you thought possible. This was perhaps the biggest lie of all. Evelyn's pushing had always felt more like emotional warfare than encouragement. I remember the last conversation I had with her. She told me that the most important thing in life wasn't what you accumulated, but what you gave away. She said that kindness was the only currency that mattered, and that the richest people were the ones who made others feel valued.
The irony of attributing these words to Evelyn Walsh, a woman who had hoarded both money and affection like a dragon guarding treasure, was not lost on me. But as I looked out at the faces in the congregation, I could see that my words were having an effect. My grandmother wasn't always easy to understand, I said, and this, finally, was the truth. She had high standards, and she didn't suffer fools gladly, but underneath that tough exterior was a woman who cared deeply about her family and her community. I paused, looking down at the casket where Evelyn lay in her best dress, probably rolling over in her grave at the saintly portrait I was painting of her. She taught me that sometimes the people who are hardest to love are the ones who need love the most, I concluded, and that true character is revealed not in how we treat those who can help us, but in how we treat those who can't. I stepped back from the podium to a round of applause that felt surreal. People were actually clapping for a eulogy about Evelyn Walsh. My Aunt Margaret was crying. My cousin Derek was nodding approvingly. Even the funeral director looked relieved. As I returned to my seat, I felt a mixture of guilt and satisfaction. I had lied through my teeth, but I had also given Evelyn a dignity in death that she had rarely shown in life. I had created a version of her that people could mourn, even if that version had never actually existed. The rest of the service passed in a blur. We sang hymns that Evelyn probably never hummed, listened to prayers about mercy and forgiveness that she rarely practiced, and watched as her casket was carried out by pallbearers who were probably the only people in the room being paid to be there. At the graveside, as we watched Evelyn Walsh being lowered into the ground, I felt a strange sense of closure. Not because I was sad to see her go, but because I had managed to give her something she had never given anyone else: the benefit of the doubt. After the burial, as people were beginning to disperse, a man in an expensive suit approached me. He was probably in his 60s, with silver hair and the kind of confident bearing that suggested he was used to being the most important person in any room. "Mr. Walsh," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Richard Hartwell, your grandmother's attorney." "Oh," I said, shaking his hand. "Nice to meet you." "That was a beautiful eulogy," he said, and there was something in his expression that I couldn't quite read. Very creative. I felt a flush of embarrassment. "Thank you. I just thought someone should say something nice about her." "Indeed," Mr. Hartwell said, his smile growing wider. "In fact, I was hoping we could speak privately. There are some matters regarding your grandmother's estate that I need to discuss with you." "With me?" I was confused. "I think you want to talk to my Uncle Robert. He's the executor." "Actually," Mr. Hartwell said, "I want to talk to you, specifically to you. Could you come to my office tomorrow morning, say 10 o'clock? I agreed, though I couldn't imagine what Evely's lawyer could possibly want with me. As far as I knew, I wasn't mentioned in her will. I had never been her favorite, never competed for her attention, never expected anything from her estate. That night, I lay in bed replaying the day's events. I kept thinking about the eulogy, about the lies I had told, about the way people had responded to this fictional version of my grandmother. I felt guilty about the deception, but I also felt something else, a strange sense of peace. For once in my life, I had chosen kindness over honesty, compassion over accuracy. The next morning, I arrived at Hartwell & Associates at exactly 10 o'clock. The law office was everything you'd expect from someone who handled the affairs of wealthy clients: mahogany furniture, leather-bound books, and an atmosphere of quiet, expensive authority. Mr. Hartwell greeted me in his office and gestured for me to sit in one of the leather chairs facing his massive desk. "Mr. Walsh," he began, "I have some rather unusual news for you." "Okay," I said, not sure what to expect. "Your grandmother has left you her entire estate." I stared at him, certain I had misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" "Her entire estate," he repeated. "The house, the investments, the bank accounts. Everything. It's worth approximately $2 million. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. "That's impossible. She barely tolerated me. My Uncle Robert, my Aunt Margaret, they're the ones who competed for her attention." "Yes," Mr. Hartwell interrupted. "She was very aware of that. In fact, she was counting on it." "I don't understand." Mr. Hartwell leaned back in his chair, his expression becoming more serious. "Your grandmother was a very complicated woman, Mr. Walsh. She spent the last 20 years of her life conducting what she called character tests on her family members." Character tests? She wanted to see who would love her, or at least treat her with basic human decency without the promise of financial reward. She wanted to know who would visit her, spend time with her, show her kindness, even when they thought there was nothing in it for them. I thought about all those awkward Sunday afternoon visits, sitting in her formal living room, listening to her complaints and criticisms. I had never enjoyed those visits, but I had never expected anything from them either. "Most of your family members," Mr. Hartwell continued, "only showed interest in your grandmother when they wanted something: money for a down payment on a house, help with college tuition, assistance with business ventures. They saw her as a bank, not as a person." "But I never asked her for anything," I said. Exactly, Mr. Hartwell smiled. You were the only one who visited her regularly without wanting anything in return. You were the only one who treated her like a human being rather than a potential source of income. But she wasn't a nice person, I said, feeling disloyal even as I said it. No, Mr. Hartwell agreed. She wasn't. She was difficult, demanding, and often cruel. But she was also testing everyone around her, trying to see who would show her basic human compassion even when she didn't deserve it. He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a sealed envelope with my name written on it in Evelyn's familiar spidery handwriting. She left this for you, he said, with instructions that it should only be given to you if you passed her final test. What was the final test? The eulogy, Mr. Hartwell said. She knew that no one in the family would want to speak at her funeral. She knew that most people would either say nothing or would struggle to find anything genuinely positive to say about her. She wanted to see if anyone would choose kindness over honesty, compassion over accuracy. I took the envelope with trembling hands. So she knew I would lie. She hoped you would choose to see the best in her, even if that best was imaginary, Mr. Hartwell said. She hoped that someone in her family would love her enough to give her dignity in death, even if she hadn't earned it in life. I opened the envelope and unfolded the letter inside. It was written in Evelyn's careful script. My dear Nathan, if you are reading this, it means you have passed my final test. It means you chose to speak kindly of me at my funeral, even though I gave you very little reason to do so during my lifetime. I know I was not an easy woman to love. I know I was often cruel, manipulative, and demanding. I know I hurt people, including you, with my words and my actions. But I want you to understand why. When I was young, I learned that people would take advantage of kindness. I learned that generosity was often seen as weakness, that trust was frequently betrayed, and that love was something that could be withdrawn without warning. So I built walls around my heart, and I tested everyone who tried to get close to me. I tested your Uncle Robert by criticizing his business decisions to see if he would still visit me when I wasn't supportive. He failed. I tested your Aunt Margaret by refusing to help with her children's college expenses to see if she would still call me when I wasn't useful. She failed. I tested your cousins in dozens of small ways, and they all failed. But you, Nathan, you never failed. You visited me even when I was difficult. You listened to my complaints. You talked to me. You treated me with basic human respect even when I didn't treat you the same way. I know you probably think I didn't notice your kindness, but I did. Every visit, every patient conversation, every moment you chose to spend with a bitter old woman who had very little to offer in return, I noticed all of it. The money I'm leaving you is not a reward for being my favorite grandson. It's a recognition of your character. You showed me compassion when I didn't deserve it, and that is the rarest and most valuable quality a person can possess. I hope you will use this inheritance to build a life that makes you happy. I hope you will be kinder to others than I was, and I hope you will remember that sometimes the people who are hardest to love are the ones who need love the most. Thank you for seeing something good in me, even when it wasn't there. With all my love and respect, your grandmother, Evelyn. I read the letter twice, tears blurring my vision. When I looked up, Mr. Hartwell was watching me with a gentle expression. She wasn't testing you to be cruel, he said quietly. She was testing you because she had been hurt so many times that she had forgotten how to trust. But she never forgot how to recognize genuine kindness when she saw it. I feel terrible, I said. All those years, I thought she was just a bitter old woman. I never realized she was lonely. She was both, Mr. Hartwell said. bitter and lonely. But she was also observant and, in her own way, wise. She knew that true character is revealed not in how we treat those who can reward us, but in how we treat those who can't. I left the lawyer's office that day with a cashier's check for $2 million and a completely different understanding of my grandmother. She had been difficult, yes, but she had also been human. She had been cruel, but she had also been testing the world to see if anyone would choose kindness over self-interest. Over the next few weeks, as I processed the inheritance and the revelation about my grandmother's true nature, I found myself thinking differently about our relationship. Those awkward Sunday afternoon visits that I had endured out of obligation suddenly took on new meaning. I hadn't been wasting my time listening to a bitter old woman complain. I was providing companionship to someone who was desperately lonely, but too proud to admit it. I also started to understand some of her behavior that had always puzzled me. The way she would sometimes ask me the same questions over and over again, as if she was testing my patience. The way she would make cutting remarks about other family members, as if she was trying to see if I would join in or defend them. The way she would sometimes just sit in silence, as if she was waiting to see if I would stay or make an excuse to leave. She had been conducting a decades-long experiment in human nature, and I had been her unwitting test subject. The hardest part was realizing how isolated she must have felt. Here was a woman with millions of dollars, a beautiful house, and a large family, but she had been so afraid of being used that she had pushed everyone away. Everyone except me, and only because I had been too indifferent to her money to bother trying to manipulate her. I thought about calling my Uncle Robert or my Aunt Margaret to tell them about the inheritance, but something held me back. They had spent years competing for Evelyn's approval, performing elaborate shows of affection whenever they thought it might benefit them financially. How would they react to learning that the grandson who had never tried to win her favor was the one who had actually won it? Instead, I decided to keep the inheritance private, at least for now. I used some of the money to pay off my student loans and buy a small house, but I was careful not to make any dramatic changes to my lifestyle that might raise questions. The most profound change wasn't financial, it was emotional. I found myself thinking about other people in my life who might be difficult or demanding, wondering if their behavior was a defense mechanism rather than their true nature. I became more patient with my students, more understanding with difficult colleagues, more willing to give people the benefit of the doubt. 6 months after the funeral, I was cleaning out my grandmother's house, my house now, when I found something that brought everything full circle. Hidden in her bedroom closet behind a row of formal dresses she rarely wore was a scrapbook. It was filled with things I had never known she had kept. Report cards from my elementary school years, newspaper clippings from when I had won a teaching award, a program from my college graduation, which I didn't even remember her attending, photos of me at various family gatherings, carefully cut out and pasted in with little handwritten captions. Nathan at Christmas, age 12. Nathan's first day of high school. Nathan helping with dishes, such a good boy. She had been paying attention all along. While I thought she barely noticed me, she had been documenting my life like a proud grandmother. The realization was both heartwarming and heartbreaking. On the last page of the scrapbook was a photo I had never seen before. It was a picture of me and Evelyn from my high school graduation party, sitting together on her back porch. I was showing her something on my phone, and she was leaning in close, actually smiling. I had no memory of this moment, but someone had captured it, and she had treasured it enough to put it in her secret scrapbook. Under the photo, in her careful handwriting, she had written, "My dear Nathan, the only one who sees me as a person, not a bank account. I hope someday he understands how much his visits mean to me." I sat on the floor of her closet, surrounded by the evidence of a love I had never known existed, and I cried. Not for the bitter, difficult woman I had thought she was, but for the lonely, frightened woman she had actually been. A woman who had been so afraid of being hurt that she had hidden her love behind walls of cruelty and tests of character. The eulogy I had given at her funeral, the beautiful lies that I had told about her kindness and wisdom, suddenly didn't feel like lies anymore. They felt like prophecy. They were the truth about who she could have been, who she wanted to be, if she hadn't been so afraid. A year later, I was still teaching at the same high school, still living quietly on my inheritance, still thinking about the lessons my grandmother had taught me, without either of us realizing it. I had learned that kindness doesn't require a reason, that compassion doesn't need to be earned, and that sometimes the most difficult people are the ones who need love the most. I never told my family about the inheritance. Let them think that Evelyn's money had gone to charity, as Mr. Hartwell had suggested it would if no one passed her final test. In a way, it had gone to charity. It had gone to someone who had learned to see past the surface of difficult people and recognize the humanity underneath. Sometimes I still visit her grave, bringing flowers and sitting quietly beside her headstone. I tell her about my students, about the small acts of kindness I try to perform in her memory, about the ways her final lesson continues to change how I see the world. And sometimes, when the wind is just right, I swear I can hear her voice, no longer sharp and critical, but warm and grateful. Thank you for seeing something good in me, even when it wasn't there. The truth is, it was there all along. It was just hidden behind years of hurt and fear and the desperate need to protect a heart that had been broken too many times. My grandmother's greatest gift to me wasn't the money she left behind. It was the understanding that everyone, even the most difficult people, deserves to be seen with compassionate eyes. Her final test wasn't really about whether I could lie convincingly at her funeral. It was about whether I could choose love over judgment, kindness over honesty, hope over cynicism. And in passing that test, I didn't just inherit her money, I inherited her wisdom, her pain, and ultimately her capacity for love. The cruel grandmother who had made my childhood difficult was gone, but the woman who had secretly cherished every moment of connection, who had documented my life with the devotion of someone who truly cared, who had spent her final years hoping that someone would see past her defenses to the lonely person inside, that woman lived on in every act of kindness I chose to perform, every moment of patience I offered to difficult people, every time I chose to see the best in someone who hadn't earned it. Evelyn Walsh had been a master teacher after all. She had just been teaching a lesson that took me 28 years to understand. What an absolutely incredible story about the power of compassion and the complexity of human nature. Evelyn's final test shows us that sometimes the people who seem the most unlovable are the ones who need love the most. What do you think about Nathan's choice to lie in the eulogy? Have you ever discovered that someone difficult in your life was actually testing your character? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you were moved by this powerful story of hidden love and unexpected inheritance, please show your support by hitting that like button and be sure to subscribe for more amazing stories every day. Don't forget to click the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.